Well, welcome to this podcast for the Peterborough Methodist Circuit. It's me, Rev Langley, today, and it's lovely to be able to join you. As you can see from the headline to this pod, we are thinking about the punch. Well, I've called it the punchline, but we're thinking about the punch. And I don't know if you've seen it. If not, where have you been? But during the Hollywood Oscars ceremony on Sunday night, Will Smith, the acclaimed actor, walked up on stage live on TV in front of millions of people and slapped Chris Rock in the face. It was reported as a punch, but it was actually a slap, and that was following an edgy joke, an edgy and not the best joke that I've ever heard cracked, an edgy joke cracked by Chris Rock. And that shocked me. I don't know about you, but I was quite deeply shocked by that and troubled by it. And on the one hand, I kind of couldn't quite reconcile how I should be more worried about the war in Ukraine, about the need to support refugees, about the calls for peace, about the calls that both sides commit to the Geneva Convention, about how we support people through escalating cost of living crisis. There are so many other things for us to focus on, areas of need, and this grabbed the headlines. But it was more than just being able to dismiss it, that because it had to have a prominence. It was occupying more space in my soul, really, and I just felt really uncomfortable at that. I went to an event at Crowland's Chapel. Hi to the Crowland Carpet Curling Club. Good to see you. But I talked to somebody there who sort of said we should be really focused on much more important things. And I'm trying to think, why was it that this has generated such interest, apart from it being between two celebrities? And I think it's because that whilst bombs and bullets trouble us, we are one step removed from being the person who pulls the trigger or presses the button or witnesses it. Very often we're shielded from the reality. It's explained to us in a way that perhaps doesn't disturb us, but also we are more than one step removed from those who make decisions on the ground to perhaps hurt others on both sides of the conflict in Ukraine. Whereas this Hollywood kind of escapade was played out in front of everyone. It wasn't censored. And here's the thing, I think it's because it drew into sharp focus the fact that conflict can exist just between two people, and raised questions about what is appropriate in terms of how we respond to conflict. I think it was the out and out, it was clearly an assault. I mean, I'm surprised by the LAPD, who've sort of said, well, we haven't had a complaint, so we're not investigating. I heard another commentator who was saying, well, although yes, an assault took place, the physical damage appears to be limited, and so whilst there have been sort of apologies, what's not really been looked at has been the wider implications. I mean, my son, or one of my sons, is 13, and I knew on the Monday it would be the talking point of the school, and there were memes already being circulated in the morning, and of course I wanted to say as a parent, that's not the way in which we manage conflict. But let's just talk for a moment about what actually happened. I mean, we do need to talk about the joke, but the trouble is, when you talk about the joke, well, there's two things that I've heard to explain what that's like. The minute you sort of dissect a joke, it's like dissecting a frog. Everybody stands round. At the end of the escapade, nobody's particularly happy, and the frog dies. Or the other one is like dissecting a joke is like trying to understand how a mermaid works by dissecting it on a mortuary slab. It doesn't quite work. But the joke was this, that Will Smith's wife, Jada, she has a hair condition. She's been very open about it. She suffers from alopecia, which causes hair loss, and she therefore has a very short haircut. But she was dressed in a green dress and sat next to Will. And the joke went, well, the first line was, and I'm paraphrasing here from Chris Rock, "Jada, we love you." And then he said, "Can't wait to see G.I. Jane 2. Now, G.I. Jane 2 is a particular film that was, I think, decades old now, involved a strong female lead. And in that film, the lead has a buzz cut hairstyle, a short hairstyle, and is kind of rough and tough, and is a strong kind of feminine lead. And it's kind of G.I. Jane against the world, so to speak. And what's gone missing in the joke is that in the initial poster, Will Smith's wife was wearing the same colour dress. It looked disappointing. I think that was lost on a lot of people. So Chris Rock cracks the joke, and what's really interesting is to unpack exactly what's happening. So first, Will Smith smiles and is seen laughing, and it doesn't look to me like this is a laugh that I'm going to laugh along with everyone else and pretend it didn't hurt. Then clearly the subsequent footage shows that his wife was, upset, and then what we saw is Chris Rock, who was trying to carry on with his jokes and his kind of introducing of the Oscars, says, "Well, hello," and Will Smith walks straight up to him on stage and slaps him around the face. As I say, it looks like a slap rather than a punch. And Chris Rock is totally amazed and handles it actually really well. You might say that whilst Will Smith couldn't take a joke or received a joke poorly, Chris Rock took a punch very well. And he said, "Wow," he said, "Will Smith just punched that out of me." And then he commented, this is one of the most exciting or historic moments in television. But he managed to carry on. Meanwhile, Will Smith sat down, and he was clearly absolutely enraged and out of control verbally, and shouts to Chris Rock, "Keep your wife's name out of your effing mouth," or whatever. And he said that twice. And so that was it was a poor joke. It went down, obviously went down badly, but there's a question about, well, Will Smith sort of reacted differently, seconds after, but initially he was laughing with everyone. And I think when I think back to how Ricky Gervais operates within the Golden Globes, there's almost an acceptance, not saying it's right or wrong, where actors and actresses understand that, there is no room for pretension in front of a comedian like Ricky Gervais. And he'll point to the hilarity, he'll point to the kind of, he'll kind of humanise you very, very quickly, suffice to say. And so the jokes are edgy and personal, but this was a joke too far for Jada and Will Smith. So beyond that, what happened afterwards was even more worrying, because I couldn't actually see the difference between where Will Smith was starting as an actor and when he wasn't acting at all. I mean, call me sceptical, but I kind of really struggle with that. But ultimately, Will Smith receives the award for Best Actor, speaks about how hard it is to be an actor and how resilient you have to be in the face of barbs and slights, and also says, I just talked to, I think it was a colleague actor who sort of said, be careful, because it's your highest point, the devil comes for you. And obviously in his subsequent apologies that weren't initially to Chris Rock, they were to the Academy and to fellow nominees and everyone else that was there, he said, "This is less than ideal, this is not love." So there's clearly some regret. But the thing that worried me is immediately after that speech, they gave him a standing ovation. So the guy has punched Chris Rock in the face, then he's given his acceptance speech, then he's got a standing ovation for what he said. And I'm thinking, this is just horrific. There's such sort of double standards. And of course, it's been played out later. The Academy condemning behaviour, underlining what it does stand for and what it doesn't stand for. Will Smith latterly apologising to Chris Rock. So I know I've covered a lot of ground there, but that's to understand the context. But I think I'm left with remembering the kind of insights from the ongoing debate about it's never right to walk up on stage and smack somebody. And this, after all, this is also a reaction to some words that somebody said that may well have been, misplaced. The joke was a poor joke, but it was a reaction to some words. And there was some comment about, well, he was defending his wife. Well, I joked to my wonderful wife. I sort of said, well, I love you very much, darling, but I'm not about to stand up and just walk on stage and punch somebody else. I mean, in all honesty, I would, if my wife needed defending, I would stand between somebody that was attacking and herself. I would speak on her behalf. However, there's also something about, I don't want to disempower my wonderful wife, for example. She's more than capable of giving account of herself, better than me, in fact. So I think, there's this, yes, you can defend a woman's honour, and we might be, but at the same time, that's not how we necessarily needed to defend it. I mean, if he'd sort of just said what he had to say and not walked up the stage and so deliberately punched Chris Rock, then I think things would be really different. I'm also minded that, yes, this has touched us, but this has touched us for Christians in the season of Lent, and it leads me to think, what can we learn from this? What can, in light of Jesus and the journey towards Jerusalem, what can we learn from it? Well, the first thing I'm reminded of this is the sheer fickleness of the crowd, and how a crowd can be shocked on the one hand, but I just don't understand the standing ovation that was given to Will Smith as he opened up his heart. And there's no question he had regret, but he opened up his heart. The standing ovation that was given to him, literally, minutes afterwards, he'd been on the stage and slapped Chris Rock. And also it's this observation that this isn't something that happens privately. This isn't candid camera going on here. I mean, these are trained actors who understand the environment in which they're working, and the Oscars is a live event. And if you look at the footage in between the live segments where the commercial breaks show, it's almost as if an accelerated version. If you go to the theatre and during the break, they say 5 minutes to curtain up, 3 minutes to curtain up, please return to your seats. I mean, at the Oscars, it's in 30 seconds, we're going live, please return to your seats. So this was not candid camera. This was live, and I'm just shocked that Will Smith kind of reached that point. Clearly tensions to be bubbling underneath, but reached that point where he felt the need to do this, which was a poor judgment. So I'm thinking about how we respond to conflict, but I'm thinking about the role of the crowd in this. I'm thinking about how we respond to conflict in making the right choices. I'm thinking about how fickle that we can be, because I'm thinking about that journey to Jerusalem, and the crowd initially on Palm Sunday, which is fast approaching, is cheering Jesus, and the next thing we know, they're baying for Jesus' blood, whipped up ferociously by others. But this concept of the crowd. And there's something also about how, on the one hand, Jesus was deliberately provocative at times. There is no escaping it. If you look to the Gospels, he will say what he feels needs to be said. He'll say it deliberately in the places where people need to hear it, but also you could make the argument that he almost chooses the point at which to exacerbate the conflict, and he knows where it's headed. He knows that he will be lifted up as a result of his preaching about the kingdom, his condemnation of the religious institutions of the day, and how people are being crushed, and how the kind of the system of social and spiritual care that's so closely wedded together is breaking apart, how there's hypocrisy. So he knows exactly what he's doing, but he doesn't ever go out and punch anyone. And it's words that put Jesus on the cross, and it's words that here led Chris Rock to get into the hot water that he did. Okay, Chris Rock's telling a joke. Jesus Christ is not joking. But I noticed with Chris Rock, he softens it at the beginning by saying, Jada, we love you, and then cracks the poor joke. So there's something about how we choose to respond to conflict. And if we follow with Jesus, then, well, at least we can say that violence is a last resort, because don't forget, at Jesus' arrest at Gethsemane, Peter took the sword of the high priest's servant and cut off the high priest's servant's ears, and Jesus heals him. You know, this is the moments before Jesus is taken along to an illegal trial and well, I want to use the word murdered rather than executed, as the system, you know, was used against him. So there's something about a lesson about how we should respond and how we impart to other people how we respond to conflict. But there's also something else that's going deeper. You might have been aware, not everyone is, about the phrase of wokeism, which is this concern, this kind of re-emphasis on the needs of understanding each other and on particularly on social justice issues. And Hollywood is particularly woke and is particularly caring, rightly so, to make sure that those who've suffered injustices as a result of their gender, as a result of their class, as a result of their race, you know, that they find freedom, and that where we see failings, that they are called out. Think about Me Too, for example, and Harvey Weinstein, who, by the way, has still retained his Oscar. It hasn't been removed from him, but the sex offender Harvey Weinstein. You know, so there is a kind of accepting and, yes, calling out of that which is wrong, but a kind of caring approach on the one hand from the Hollywood community. But what strikes me is that when somebody comes up and says some words and makes a joke, that suddenly Will Smith turns, and it's almost that there's an irony in, we're very liberal, we can be very accepting until somebody else says something that offends us, at which point, well, we're not just going to say words back, we're going to walk up on the stage and smack them. And I see a hypocrisy in that. And there's something in this about free speech, something profound in free speech. There's a phrase that I really think is helpful that I've heard in circulation before, that comedians are like canaries in a coal mine. The way in which we react to comedians, because comedians push the boundaries of what is acceptable to say. They will make a joke around the things that we all think, but we won't necessarily say out loud, about the hypocrisies that we see. And there's this phrase that comedians are like the canaries in the coal mine. When comedians start getting censored, we should get worried. Now, that's not to say that you can't be irresponsible in which we say. We have laws here in the UK, don't we, about hate speech. The law is there. What we need to do is prosecute on the law and if you are inciting people to hatred, then you know that you should be prosecuted for that. And we should see the impact of the law being meted out upon people who choose to do that. But my point is that if we want free speech, then we need to accept that there's a vulnerability with that. We need to accept that people will say the unthinkable, will say things that are inappropriate, and it's for the community to find peaceful and transformative ways in which to manage the outcome. At the moment, it seems to me that we are very good at identifying where people have been oppressed, overlooked, but I think we lack the skill, we lack the ability to actually improve things and make sure that the conflict that exists, as people understand that they're in the wrong, is transformative, rather than people shutting down and not saying anything because I don't feel equipped to be able to talk about this or that, and therefore by silence we perpetuate the divisions that were already there anyway, and arguably they can be worsened because people feel that they're a failure. So that I'm very interested, for example, at the Methodist Church statement on homophobia, which we've looked at in light of God in Love Unites Us, which is to say that it's not homophobic to not understand fully the issues that somebody in a particular minority may well struggle with. It's not homophobic to be ignorant around language. But I do feel that with a lot of these issues, as we raise the profile of those who feel discriminated against, I think a good number of people don't have the confidence to speak freely and try and understand what the nature of the conflict is and why certain phrases or words might be offensive. But my main point is that if we're going to celebrate free speech, if we're going to promote free speech, if we're going to develop our thinking in society, then we need to be vulnerable with it. And that means that we need to understand that we could be hurt. It's okay to be offended in a way, but to use your offence or to project your offence in such a way that we close down further discussions is not okay. So I think the issue for us is to understand that we can't have our cake and eat it. If we want free speech, we're going to have to be offended. We're going to have to face the concept that perhaps Chris Rock might, if we're in the public domain, make a joke about us that is hurtful and upsetting. The question is not whether Chris Rock's got the right to do that unless he's inciting hatred. The question is, how do we respond in the best possible way? And it's interesting that the conversation after this kind of this punch was thrown has been far more healthy, I feel, than actually the initial punch that was taken by Will Smith. And I think we could have had this debate without the punch going in. So there we are as we journey towards Lent. That's a profound thing to begin thinking about, that where would Jesus be without free speech, or without being prepared to say what he honestly thought and believed was, needed to be said? Where would we be without free speech? And there's a need for us to understand that in life we need to be vulnerable and open and find constructive ways of dealing with conflict. So folks, crikey, that's a good 22 minutes of pod for you. This was just a presentation as I simply found a different way to offer something for a Friday. It may not come the same way again, but wherever you are, God bless you, as I'm holidaying at home from this week, and I look forward to joining folks for Holy Week itself. Take care and stay safe. God bless, folks. Goodbye.